All right, it is 11:45. Are checking our technology. For those of you joining us virtually, can everyone hear? I'm
Yes.
watching in the chat. Thank you. Wonderful. And for those in the room, is everyone able to see and hear? Okay, wonderful. We'll go ahead and proceed. So, first of all, a little emergency exit information. As you can see, there are 3 emergency exits. If you go out this way, you can go up to the front or out this back way, depending on what's going on. And hopefully we won't have to do that, but just want to make sure everyone can see the emergency exits in the meeting. And I'd like to welcome everybody here in the room. For a person who's a strong extrovert, COVID has been tough on me, and I cannot tell you how nice it is to see all of you in person. And then for those of you who are joining us virtually, isn't it nice to have these technological options? And we are so glad you are here with us. I'm Dana Cowley. I'm with Hanford Mission Integration Solutions, a Hanford contractor, and we thank you for joining us today's public meeting. It's the Department of Energy's 5-year plan presentation. We are meeting at the Three Rivers Convention Center, both in person and remotely. This meeting is being recorded. It's going to be posted to the Hanford.gov events calendar to this meeting entry, and we'll do that as soon as we can get that up to you. Today's event is part of a 30-day public feedback period, not a formal comment period, but a best practice to help get information out to you. It's going to run through November 3rd. We're eager to answer all your questions, but we're not taking formal comment today. All the formal comments are welcome and encouraged, but we do take them in writing only. We prefer email, but of course we'll accept snail mail because we want to receive all the comments. So we will begin with a presentation from our DOE leadership, followed by perspective from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Washington State Department of Ecology. We'll ask that you all hold your questions until everyone has finished speaking, and then we'll do our best to answer all the questions we can. If you're joining virtually, we'll be using the chat box feature. In the chat, Colleen has added the link to the Hanford.gov events calendar and to the placemat itself that shows the 5-year plan. If you want to get to these materials or learn how to place your comments, just go to Hanford.gov and you can find your content there. If you're here in the flesh and we're done, we'd like you to ask your questions by raising your hand. Wait until you're called upon and we'll do our best to answer all the questions. If you're on Teams, just raise your hand or put your question in the chat. Colleen will read that to you. And if you're on the phone, we'll call on you. We have a method to take your phone call answers as well. So for those of us joining the telephone only, you're on mute. You have to press *6 to unmute. And then we ask that you press *6 again to go back on mute when we're done so we don't get a lot of feedback. And if you're on the phone and you put the call on hold, sometimes we get elevator music and everything else. And so we ask that you please don't put the call on hold, just hang up. You can come back in and join us again. So let's get right to our presenters. On my left, we have Delmar Noyes. He's with the Department of Energy, the Assistant Manager for the Tanks Farm projects. Tom Tainer, he's the Deputy Assistant Manager for River and Plateau. And then we have Corey Lowe at the end, the Deputy Assistant Manager for Mission Support here at the site. So we'll begin with Delmar. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction. It saves me introducing myself, so thanks. So we're here to share with you the Hanford 5-year plan and kind of how it fits into our process of evaluating and putting together our budgets and moving forward with our mission. And again, as noted, this is really a briefing. These aren't final, and we're looking for input from you individuals and the organizations that you represent to help to make this a better product. And we'll spend some time going through it and kind of sharing how it fits into the bigger process that we use in terms of planning and executing our mission, kind of in light of the federal budget processes and how we have to put all that stuff together. So next slide, please. Really, the objective is to really discuss our site goals and objectives in the context of this plan and this tool. As you'll notice, we will break this up into 3 primary areas: tank waste cleanup mission, which I'll focus on this piece of it; risk reduction, which Tom will be providing some additional detail; and then the mission and site infrastructure, Corey will be talking to. But really what we're talking about is the 5-year plan, which is an overview of the cleanup and our accomplishments and really how we're safely driving the risk reduction and using the funding that we have available to move the mission forward and trying to present that in a 5-6 year window of time to provide a bigger perspective for our public and congressionals to understand what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish and what we are accomplishing with the significant resources that we were provided. Um, as you'll see when I go through the placemark, we kind of assume a flat budget profile for this element, not trying to project that's what will or will not happen, but kind of as a baseline for consideration. So this is really assumes a annual funding of about 2.7 billion, which is essentially where our funding was last year. And also there may be some additional COVID-19 impacts as we work through coming out of that and some of the industry recovers and some of the procurement systems and the infrastructures return to what will become the new normal. Next slide, please. So this is a very busy picture, and I've asked to kind of, we'll pop up the actual placemat on the screen. Thank you very much. And I'll kind of take a few minutes to walk through this just to give you a sense of what's in it. Then I'll back up and kind of talk about how this fits into our planning process, and then we'll go through the details of what we did last year and what we're planning to do the next few years. So if you could physically have it follow through in the discussions and refer to it in the following, but this is the placemat that we're talking about. It kind of starts with the 5-year plan, which is on the slide on the right there. Is kind of the first page of that. And really, it's the 5-year plan, how are we going to drive the risk reductions within our funding allocations? And we're talking, minimum safe operations. That's an enabler for all of our activities. If we don't achieve that, then the rest of the mission isn't going to be executed safely. Risk reduction isn't worth placing individuals or our workforce at risk. That's a very high priority for all of us. We have the waste treatment mission, which is the area that in my role I focus on. The risk reduction mission. And again, that's a role that Tom and his organization focus on. Waste disposition and then the mission management. Major components of mission is tank waste treatment, risk reduction, and mission site and infrastructure. You'll see in there some basic descriptions of the scope that we're dealing with in each one of those as you look at this later for your own feedback and perspectives to us. On the other side is a really busy picture, and we'll talk about this more when we go through the individual accomplishments. But this is really a picture color-coded to those areas of the major accomplishments in this window of time. One of the cautions is this really focuses on, starts or finishes, and it doesn't have a lot of the details of ongoing things. So it's really when big things start, big things finish. There's lots of ongoing activities that aren't depicted on this. So don't worry if a particular area that you're interested in isn't specifically addressed. It doesn't mean it's not being done, but this is really being done in the context of a multi-year tool to mark those major progressions and major accomplishments or major initiations of activities in the big picture of mission execution. If you flip to the other side of the placemat, this is kind of where the more detail is, and we'll spend some more time talking about this after I kind of place this in the bigger context. But what you'll see is this is intended to be updated annually. So I know we're collecting inputs and with the due date of November 3rd, but this will be a repeating cycle, not the last opportunity. So frankly, if you have input even beyond that, it'll be something we can use as we move forward in the cycle of annual evaluations. Each year we'll add a year. Each year we'll give a status on the accomplishments. In this case, obviously, fiscal year 22 is a year of accomplishments, and we're talking 23 to fiscal year 24. And we'll walk through these details, again, with the caveat that the critical activities here are not intended to be fully inclusive, but to really represent to the stakeholders, congressional, tribe members, what are those big things in terms of starts or finishes that we're envisioning happening, significant milestones in those years. If it says we started something in 23, we won't say we'll continue it in 24 and 25. It's kind of a given that it'll be continued until it's done. And some additional side information on it. So that's really the document, the placemat, the communication tool that we're briefing, and that we're really interested on feedback in terms of effectiveness. And we'll spend some more time giving you some more details and backgrounds and summarizing what those objectives that we are on this placemat are to help you in your review and evaluation and feedback. So with that, I think we can move back to the slide set. And again, at this point, I'm going to try to give a outline of the plan and how it's put together and kind of how it fits with other things, and really talk about it and how it provides a focus on the mission objectives and our near-term strategies. So to do that, a Hanford mission is defined by many external drivers, but ultimately, as the owner and responsible agency, we're inherently responsible for, within environmental management, as the owner of the site, of forming and executing the cleanup, from the weapons productions, the past history of Hanford operations. So that is our fundamental mission as federal employees, and we use a wide range of contracts and a large portion of frankly, local community workforce to accomplish that. We do that under oversight and laws of the nations, and that includes the ones enforced by Washington State, which are key, and the tri-party agreement and consent decree and other legal drivers for those activities. And we plan this in the long-term perspective of environmental management, which we're the Department of Energy, and environmental management is a sub-element of the Department of Energy that's really focused on the environmental remediation from past weapons complex operations. And Hanford is obviously one of the keys to that across the country, but not the only element. So there's a EM-wide strategic plan. And then there's a strategic mission and vision of Hanford and our mission moving forward, which includes minimum safe operations, waste treatment, risk reductions, waste disposition, and the long-term stewardship. As we work through the planning process, from the big picture to individual years, we create integrated priority lists. So we try to list the objectives we have in the next year in priority order, and then are in a process of sharing with our regulators and other stakeholders to get feedback and perspectives. And frankly, the HAB discussions, which I know preceded this event, is another place where we seek that input from. And then from that, at least have the ability to have as common a vision as we can achieve and what's our fundamental objective. So regardless what happens with funding, we're kind of on the common vision of what's number one priority, number two priority, and three priority. So when we have to make those tough decisions, the department is not cutting something that's, collectively the communities and all of our stakeholders' first priorities, but that's done in a knowingly and predictable way. And then that feeds into our budgeting processes, which then feed back into annual updates of the EM-wide vision, and it feeds back to the next annual year process and the IPL. So it's kind of a repetitive cycle. The 5-year plan is really an element in this process that we use to help prioritize within the risk criteria that we use, at least as the department looking at the work we do. And really it's, I think I mentioned to it, is, personnel risk, the workers risk, the environmental public risks, and the mission execution risks, as well as technical and complexity issues. All those factors are things we look at and how we move forward. Brian Vance, I think, spoke to the HAB yesterday, and one of the things that he emphasized in that discussion is time isn't our friend. We have a significant volume of waste and tanks that weren't designed to be stored this long, and the quicker we can develop strategies and approaches and technologies to safely retrieve, treat, and dispose of the waste and protect the Pacific Northwest, the better off that we are. But kind of stepping back a little bit in the budget formulation process behind these visions, which really is a process by which we get congressional support and appropriations, one, approval to do this, and two, the funding authorization to execute it. we run those budgets in multi-year cycles. So we're typically in a 3 to 4 year budget cycle at any one time. So for today, and I'll go into that a little more specific here in just a few minutes, but I want to hold off on that for a second, and talk a second about the 5-year plan itself. Its purpose is really kind of be that stopgap, that communication tool that bridges that 1, 2, and 3 year budget cycle to a 4 or 5 year period to try to share internally, externally, with public and congressional entities and communication places, that larger term. What are we trying to do in the next 5 years? What's the major accomplishments that if we get support, if we achieve the success we plan and fully expect to get, that you should expect from us? What are we going to deliver for the investment? And sharing that in a window of time that goes beyond, the single year, and even frankly beyond maybe some of the administrations and political changes. So there's some stability and understanding the continuity of this longer term mission. Major accomplishments, appropriate execution in the current fiscal year, aligned to the congressional budget in the upcoming years as we get into those developmental processes. The placemat only reflects major field execution activities and does not include minimum safe operations, administrative, and ongoing activities. So as I kind of opened up with, it's really a communication tool to try to flag those key things that we're trying to achieve or have achieved in the time window. And it is informed in a repetitive cycle back to the larger EM strategy about how across all the EM, Hanford is but one element of the national cleanup from the weapons complex. It is a large element of it, and it's a larger piece of it from an environmental liability perspective. But it is by far not the only element. And those other elements are significant impacts to their communities as well. And this is a way for us to communicate what we're achieving with the resources we're being given, and recognizing the size and scope of Hanford. It's a very, very large portion of the total environmental management budget. So I'd like to kind of take a second and step back into the budget cycle that I was stepping into a little bit before, to give at least some sense of why kind of a 5-year window was created by the department, and why we think it's an important communication tool to hopefully give some perspectives for comments and feedback. But at any given time, we operate, and frankly, I think states operate similarly, in a 3-year budget cycle, with the fiscal year, and our end of year is September 30th, October 1st is the beginning. So right now we're executing fiscal year 23. Now, ideally, we would have had a authorization and a bill signed before the beginning of the fiscal year, October 1st, and we would be operating on that. That's ideal. We're under what's termed a continuing resolution, which is basically a congressional action saying, well, without a bill, please continue doing what you're doing and authorized at last year's funding. That's a gross summary, but that's essentially what it amounts to. So we are executing under that, and it is consistent to last year, so that really isn't throwing any major issues into our execution this year. But that's the execution year that we're spending money, tracking costs, reporting to the single penny of how all that money is being spent to execute the mission. 24 is in the congressional phase. We provided the input. It's been evaluated across the EM portfolio, and it it goes into OMB and gets compiled into the federal budget. And ideally, the process would result in the president's budget submittal to Congress in the February time period. That may be a little bit later this year, and I am not a budget expert, so but that's my understanding. But that's the normal process, and really that's just the president's budget telling Congress, this is what I want. And then for those who are familiar with the process, Congress goes through lots of processes, and frankly, what we get is usually not the same thing as requested. And in our case, positively, it's usually been more support than requested, at least in some areas. And then, so that's fiscal year 24. And then 25 is really where we're beginning in the preparation process. So, this placemat and, discussions on budgets, from our perspective at this point, input is really geared toward fiscal year 25, because that's the next opportunity we have that will be providing input and feeding up into the budgeting process, our needs. And that process will begin in earnest, March of this year, where we get guidance back about, what are the parameters and what we need to submit and that kind of stuff. So we're constantly working essentially 3 budget years at any one time. And frankly, one of my first questions is what year are we talking about? Because I'll get a question, and I mean, I had it happen yesterday, a request from OMB on a briefing for, some particular work scope, and I was thinking it was 23 and it was actually 25. And the answers obviously are two dramatically different scopes of work. So it is a balancing act. But I share this simply to give you some perspective of why we think that 5-year window that the placemat's trying to communicate is important, and where it fits in that sequence of publicly facing communication tools and tools that we try to get perspective so we can get feedback from our stakeholders, from the public, and also give the appropriators and the congressional staff members some perspectives of where we're going with the investments that we're asking for. So kind of in summary, the outcome from the budget formulation process then really goes into realigning our integrated priority list. And again, integrated both across ORP and RL. We have 2 separate budgets. We still are managed separately congressionally, but we do look at it across the board as an integrated portfolio of activities. And the focus of the 5-year plan is really to summarize the major initiating and or completing project activities that demonstrate significant Hanford mission progress. So that's the objective that we're trying to achieve, and kind of the objective we'd be interested in your feedback from that perspective. Numerous ongoing projects and support activities, that enable these mission progress, not specifically identified on the placement, and is not intended to minimize their importance to achieve the mission and reflect the overall accomplishments. It's just the nature of this particular tool and how we're trying to use it to communicate. The status reflects the 5 years is really updating at the beginning of the fiscal year, once a year. We're not trying to, keep it on any more frequent basis of update as of that. It is currently a draft, so what we're sharing you is not intended as a final. This is what we're doing, and we're just interested in feedback after the fact. It truly is a draft, and I know we were making changes just up before this presentation to make sure that the current version is what we're talking to and sharing with you. The strategic vision for the site and the EM complex is also updated annually. So through the budgeting process, we go into a vision update process based on what was accomplished, wasn't, feed that back into our integrated priority list, which is a shorter, think of it the next year perspective, and updating our 5-year placemat to give the longer term perspective. At least that's the idea and the purpose we're trying to do with it. The EM vision is much higher level and is updated annually. It reflects a full 10-year window of time, and it's informed, and our input is based on, what we have in our 5-year plan. And again, the purpose of this discussion really is to provide the perspective of what this document is and how we're using it in terms of the process moving forward. And I think at this point in the presentation, we'll kind of switch gears a little bit for you and switch to going through what is the scope that's actually in this and what these bullets are trying to represent, and have some time for questions from that, I think, at the end of the presentation. Okay. And let's see. I think we're doing okay for time. All righty. So we'll do that. So slide 5, fiscal year 22. I'll give a shot at kind of summarizing this, the risk reduction and the mission integration. The gentlemen on my left have much more knowledge, and they will kind of introduce with what we accomplished last year when they go through their sections in the out years. But fiscal year 22 for Hanford as an entity, and specifically tank waste stream mission, has been extremely successful, and a lot of key accomplishments have been achieved. So in the tank waste treatment mission in fiscal year 22, we completed the retrievals of AX 102 and AX 104. These are two of our single shell tanks that we completed removal of the full waste from those tanks into our double shell tanks for storage until treatment. We have one more tank in this farm, and you'll see that in the out year goals and objectives. That would be our second farm completed. Probably most important is we completed TISCR, tank side season removal system operations. Well, we completed construction, startup testing, and operations. And at this point have treated about 380,000 gallons of waste. So this is pre-treated, staged, ready to feed WTP in hot commissioning. So that's critically important. Our objective here is to have our full tank, which is about 1 million gallons, pre-staged to support hot commissioning, and then we'll continue operations of this facility or this capability to maintain a feed for the DFLAW operations. We'll talk some more about that later. Completed the waste treatment plant power loss testing. This was really the first critical integrated test that WTP did on the startup sequence. I know Matt was speaking to Heb earlier here and had more detailed discussions, but a major step in the process of starting up that facility to begin waste treatment. Completed the WTP water runs, which is again running water through the systems to make sure that they performed as designed before we put more complex simulants into them. And we completed the low activity facility melter heat up. And again, I think brief, we did start that heat up. We are repairing some of the heaters, and that will continue. Initiated the FLAW cold commissioning with simulated wastes and initiated the LAW facility melter heat up. In risk reduction, completed the plutonium Purex, plutonium uranium extraction plant facility demonstrations, implemented interim record of decisions on the 200 BP5 and 200 PO1 areas. And again, these gentlemen will give more details later. Completed the garnet filter and sand filter media transfer and T plant, and completed installation of 7 of the micropiles in building 324 to support the excavation of the 296 area. And then in our mission and site infrastructure support, critically important to direct feed low activity waste treatment, we completed a 12-inch portable water loop into the WTP. Critically important to be able to run the facility. You know, all the great treatment facilities in the world don't work if you don't have roads to take workers to them, and if you don't have power, and if you don't have water, and you don't have sanitary systems, things fall apart really quickly. So that's what you see in the fiscal year 22 accomplishments in the chart. Hopefully you have it in front of you, you can follow along. And next step I'd like to do is walk through the sequence of events you'll see in the chart that are under the tank waste treatment. We decided to kind of talk in these areas for multiple years to provide more continuity in the description here verbally, but you'll notice in the placemat, all 3 elements are covered and what specifically are the major accomplishments for each year, so you can see how they kind of work in tandem. So what I'm speaking about here for the next few minutes and the next few slides will be really specifically those elements that fall under the green tank waste treatment mission. And just to, excuse me, give some perspectives, this is associated with safely managing the 177 underground storage tanks within 12 single shell tank farms and 6 double shell tank farms that are within the Hanford site. These are collectively the Hanford tank farms. It's the initiation of the tank waste treatment through the DFLAW, both with the tank side season removal and the WTP startup and commissioning activities. It also includes the transfer and operations, as I mentioned, of removing waste from our single shell tanks and moving them to our available double shell tanks to place them in a safer configuration for storage until a treatment. And we do that as rapidly we can with the DST space that we have. Also in this scope is operations of the 222S lab, which provides analytical resources for pretty much all the contractors across the site within the tank farms and other contractors. The only exception is the WTP has an internal lab for its internal operations. So with that, if you're following along the chart, we'll be starting in fiscal year 23 on the top under tank waste activities. So for fiscal year 23, our goals and objectives are to complete the second law melter heat up and start the readiness review for the waste treatment plant. So as I shared earlier, we initiated the first melter heat up. We'll finish that, run it a bit, get some operational proficiencies, making sure that there's no fundamental issues, material or design issues, because we don't want to start up the second one until we have confidence that the first one won't fail, frankly, or there's some weaknesses that we can go repair the second one before we put the glass in it. Because as you shared, once you get the glass in the melter molten, we pretty much have to keep it operational to keep the glass fluid. Complete management assessment of the law cold commissioning. And these are all activities to make sure the culture and the people and the procedures and the processes are in place to be able to safely operate WTP. We were progressing the waste treatment plant high level waste facility design. In all the scenarios we see moving forward, the current high level waste facility is a key element of that. I will continue on the tank farm side to continue to optimize the tank side season removal system, TISCR operations to continue to treat more waste to support hot commissioning. Our 242A evaporator, this is the facility that removes water from the waste to maintain double shell tank system. So essentially, to move waste around the tank farms, we add water to either dissolve it or to move the solids around. It gets into the new double shell tank. The evaporator then basically evaporates that water component out of the tank to concentrate it so then we can make more space and do more retrievals. That's the 242 evaporator. It's been down for the last year and a half. We've replaced transfer lines to the evaporator and did significant upgrades in safety systems and control systems. So getting that back up online and doing evaporator campaigns will be key. And then we're completing a very large set of upgrades to the liquid effluent retention facility, LERF, which is a series of 7 million, well, it was 3. This year it is now 4. We finished the 4th one. 7 million nominally gallon storage areas to take that secondary liquid waste from WTP off gas treatment to store it before we treat it at the fluid treatment facility. And then that will basically, the solid waste would go to the integrated disposal facility. And the treated waste basically is released under drinking water standards. And the fluid treatment facility itself is also in the last phase of upgrades to add the capability to treat the volume and the contents of that secondary waste stream. So that's been a completion of about 3 years of ongoing upgrades, then doing a campaign, upgrades and doing a campaign. So it's been a significant effort. All get us into perspective. Fiscal year 23 for tank farms and for tank waste is about getting ready to start tank waste treatment, vitrification of low activity waste. That is the objective. And again, in high level waste, begin the preps for the next phase, which will be the high level waste operations. In 23, I mentioned already, we'll complete construction of that 4th basin at LERF. Again, makes no sense, but the 4th basin we build is basin 41. The 3 established ones are 42, 43, and 44. I don't know how that makes sense. I don't know who put that together, but that's the way it is. Probably to confuse people, which it does me all the time. So 41 is a new basin, and we have 41, 2, 3, and 4. 41 will specifically be used solely for WTP, and it allows us to separate that from the other streams we get from the other contractors, because this facility basically treats groundwater runoff and that kind of stuff and leachate from multiple facilities, and it will continue that function as well. And then although it's not under my contractor scope, part of that scope is completing the integrated disposal facility upgrades and readiness review. So this is a RCRA landfill permitted disposal that will take all the DFLAW, glass, and secondary waste forms. And it's it was built in 2006, but these are upgrades and to turn it into an operational facility being able to support DFLAW. So at the 10,000 foot level, that is what the tank waste mission is in fiscal year 23. Obviously, as we talked about, all the safe operations, tank integrity programs, all those things are continuing. But this is really the mission accomplishment, the major accomplishments that we're trying to project are important for fiscal year 23 relative to, support and activities we're doing. Moving forward to 24, and this slides aren't broken up by year, but the last bullet on this, sorry, back up to slide 7. That last bullet on this slide is where we start off in 24. Complete the readiness review and authorization for WTP law facility. So the picture is the law facility, and this is basically in 24 beginning treatment of actual tank waste that we completed in Tisker starting this year. So this is completing the readiness review, which is the last activity for the department to authorize operations. So that's obviously a objective that many of us have been working on. I've personally been working on for 20 plus years. So it's significant to many of us. And it really is the beginning of the beginning. I mean, we can talk forever about when will the tank waste treatment be done, but until we can say we've started it, it's hard to talk about how long it's going to take. I know one thing: if I don't start, it won't get done. So starting the first step is critical and a major accomplishment. This opens up, once we get it operational, treating or moving essentially 1 million gallons of supernatant out of the double shell tanks a year, which is equivalent to creating a new double shell tank a year, which then opens up downstream opportunities to continue single shell tank retrieval. So it's a daisy chain effect on an integrated tank mission. 24, continuing to the next slide, completing hot commissioning of the effluent management facility, initiating construction of, and we call it Advanced Modular Pretreatment System, AMPS, to be cute, I guess. This is the Tisker replacement. So think of this. We have a tank site season removal. It is a demonstration project, a proof of the system. We're using it to create feed, and we're storing 1 million gallons, but it wasn't sized to keep keyed up with 2 melters operating at full capacity. 2 melters operating will require about 10 gallons per minute instantaneous feed. Tisker is about half that. So this is really the beginning of the construction of its replacement. We're still in the AOA process looking at alternatives, but conceptually you could think of it as 2 equivalent Tisker units operating that are permanently designed to run, for a longer period than the Tisker is. Tisker was a 5-year R&D permit. It's got hose and hoses, which aren't designed for permanent operations. Now there's some opportunities to refurbish that unit and continue its operation, which is probably one of the options we'll look at. But that's key to maintaining our ability to feed an operational waste treatment for multiple years in the future. Complete retrievals from AX farm. That's the second full farm we completed with AX 104. I always get it wrong. 101. We have AX 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the last one we're doing is AX 101. Again, some engineer's logic, but 101 is the last of the 4, not the first. But that'll be the reason, just so you know, is it has the most volume and it was the most challenging. So that's why it's last. So that was kind of a joke, but that'll be last of the A farm. That's the AX farm. That's completion of the second full retrieval of all the single shell tanks from 2 farms, C and AX. We've also have a S farm retrieval done, and then we'd be moving forward into A farm retrievals. And even today, actually for the last 2 years, we've been spending significant resources preparing A farm for retrievals. We have the retrieval equipment, and preps and transfer systems already being installed for the A retrieval. And A101 actually is the first one in that farm. So that's all going in parallel. And then we'll complete construction of the U farm surface barrier. This is basically a barrier over this U farm that keeps water from going through. It'll be diverted to an evaporation pond where it can be evaporated. Interim action to minimize water or snow melt from entering the ground and driving contaminants around the tanks from past leaks and operations further down. So that's an additional barrier. We have 4 barriers we've already done. So we have like 42 tanks that are already covered by barriers in this lat. I think in number 6, an additional 16. So that's 24 accomplishments. Again, I'm focusing here on the tank farm tank waste mission. So moving to the 25 slot, uh, we've started up DFLAW operations. WTP is operating at full capacity. And really in 25, we'll be learning how to run the machine more effectively to maximize how much waste we can actually get into the glass and how quickly we can get that waste into the glass to maximize this treatment capability. We will fully resume construction of the high-level waste facilities in 25. And I mentioned the 222S laboratory, which is a key element of doing analytical work, both hot cell and lower level rad analysis for the tank farm operations and across the site. And we'll be continuing to upgrade facilities. The next major upgrade of that facility will begin in 25 to do some renovations of some rooms that facility. Quite frankly, they don't have operating bathrooms, they don't have operating showers, and they are using lab space for non-lab work because of some of those issues. So these are upgrades to provide us more footprint to do more work and to be able to keep up with the DFLAW and the future high-level waste operations that are coming forward. And you see a picture of the high-level waste in the slide. That's the current picture where we'll be resuming construction of that facility. And again, like I said, we'll be resuming design activities and those kinds of things, well before this point. And one other point I'll make on this one is our intent on this is to fully complete the design before we reinitiate construction from the lessons learned from the DFLAW portions of this project. Next slide. Okay, so yeah, at this point, I'll hand it to the risk reduction to Tom.
Good day. Again, my name is Tom. I'm the Deputy System Manager for River and Plateau. And our scope of work really is focused for risk reduction is you can consider it geographical, where we're trying to, over these years, the next 5 years, to get up off the river, Columbia River, and then start work in the Central Plateau. So our focus is going to be, as you'll see going through this, is the 100K area. We have the spent fuel basin, K West, that has 1.2 million gallons of contaminated water. Our focus will be to dewater that and then pre-treat the liquid, the water that's in there, so we can put it into the LERF basin, liquid effluent retention facility that Delmar mentioned. So, and then that also includes the 300-296. So you can see it's getting up off the river, and the 324 building is in the 300 area just north of Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And it's about 900 feet from the river. And the K West spent fuel basin and all that water is about 1,200 feet. You can see we want to make sure we get that risk out away from the river. That's our focus. Delmar already indicated on her 22 successes. And what we're looking forward is to continue that. Our priorities really are base ops, or min safe, as some people like to say, minimum safe. We need to keep those facilities, nuclear facilities. We have roughly 14 nuclear facilities. Some are category 2, which are high risk, and some are category 3, and a number of radiological facilities that we have to keep in a safe configuration through surveillance and maintenance and repairs as necessary till we can get to them to do the final deactivation and demolition. Our next priorities is to support the DFLAW mission. Delmar already indicated the integrated disposal facility. We will be actually operating that. The CPCCO will be operating that to support the DFLAW mission, direct feed low activity waste, as well as we also support the tanks and other sites with our environmental restoration disposal facility, which takes care of low level waste. We also manage the low level mixed waste, which would have hazardous constituents such as PCBs, things of that nature that has to be separated out before we can do that. Also, one of our other biggest risks is you can see in the photograph on page 10, the interim safe storage of the KS reactor. We're close to completing that. We're on schedule to complete that by the end of this month, early November. And that'll be a big win. That'll be the 7th of 9 reactors that have been placed in interim safe storage. And then we'll transfer that over to Corey Lowe and his people for long-term stewardship is what it's called. The last reactor to be put into interim safe storage is the K West reactor. But until we can dewater the basin, then take the basin out, and get that prepared. You'll see later on in the years that we actually are going to be putting that into interim safe storage as well. The next bullet is complete installation of the 324 building micropiles. Micropiles, what we're putting in there underneath the B hot cell. The reason why we're putting those in is to provide structural support to the cell, to prevent, subsidence, because the waste site that we found back in 2010 contains a field of cesium strontium, and I think the highest rating we got was 12,000 rad per hour. And when you put that into consideration that a lethal dose is 500 rad per hour or per exposure. So it's a high risk, it's close to town, that's why we're going after it as a priority. And then also the other high risk item that we have is the waste encapsulation storage facility. Those where the cesium strontium capsules are currently being stored in wet storage in a pool. We're in the process now of doing our engineering studies and testing and mock-ups at the maintenance and storage facility in the 400 area. And our goal is, you'll see later on, to in the next out years, is to actually transfer those by the end of the this 5-year period into dry storage. So that'll mitigate that risk. And then we're going to continue, as I indicated, the plutonium uranium extraction facility. We're going to be doing what we can to get the facility ready for long-term storage if necessary, but most likely to prepare for demolition. We'll do the first 3 of the 4 Ds. It'll be deactivation, decommissioning, and decontamination. Yeah. So, and go from there. Demolition will be the last, but that'll be out in the future when funds are available. But back to priorities, DFLAW, 100K basin, the waste encapsulation storage facility to dry storage, 300-296 waste site, and then also to indicate that we are integrated with the other folks, other contracts and other programs, DOE programs. Next slide, please. These items that you see here, if you look at fiscal year 23 on the chart that Delmar has, our area is going to be in the red under risk reduction. I don't plan to really repeat that, but you can see again, we're continuing on with trying to prepare those 5 key items to go to final completion of mitigating the risk. The demo preps for the plutonium concentration facility, which is 224B, which is near B plant. They're in the process right now doing the characterization of that facility, trying to find out where the hot spots are with regards to hold up radioactive material, as well as industrial problems, acid, things of that nature. In the 100K area, there's a number of items of waste that were used to process the sludge to get it out of the K West Basin into safe storage in T plant via canisters that were transferred up to T plant for interim storage, excuse me. And there's a number of pull tools, piping, hoses, things like that that'll be put into these vertical pipe casings, and most of it will be transuranic waste, so it'll be processed and then segregated out to go to the waste isolation pilot plant in Carlsbad. Next thing that we're doing, the reduction oxidation facility. This is another chemical processing facility, and the reason why we're replacing the ventilation system is that the current ventilation system is 1940s technology. It's outdated and does not provide sufficient airflow to protect the workers. And again, what we're planning to do is get the ventilation system in and then start doing the characterization followed by deactivation, decommissioning. In fiscal year 24, the second to last bullet, this is the big win for all of us. This is where we're going to get the 1 million gallons of water out of the K West Basin. It'll be pre-filtered again so that we meet the LERF, liquid effluent retention facility requirements. It'll be stored there until it can be processed at the effluent treatment facility. So again, that's our connection between our program and Delmar's. And then once that's done, we do plan to, as we did with the K East Basin, we'll fill it full of what we call a control density fill, and then we'll take it out in pieces. And then again, last thing I mentioned about getting the redox and other high-risk facilities ready for demolition, that'll be 24. You can read through the list here. The redox facility, there is a plutonium recovery hood that will be done in 24. Obtain the 100K interim rod, 24. initiate transfer of the cesium-strontium capsules dry storage. Right now, we're on schedule to start that in July 2025 and complete in November of 26. That's we're on schedule now. As the operators again work and gain efficiency, we might be able to, move that forward safely to the left so it can be done earlier. Complete deactivation of the 324 building. Again, by this time, we plan to have the waste site out and getting the building ready for demolition. And pure plutonium uranium extraction facility, this is the time frame in 27 that we plan to start doing the characterization and hazard abatement to get that ready for final demolition in the future. No set date for that. And then you can see the last one. The photograph on the right is in the background. You can see the B plant, which is a processing canyon. And then also there's the waste encapsulation storage facilities, that smaller building attached to the long gray one. And then the white L shape, you can see that's where the actual capsules will be stored for interim storage. And they'll be air cooled at that time. Okay, again, in summary, if you look at this window, what we're looking at, and again, this is all proposed, it's not final. We're looking to get the K-West basin out, dewatered and out. We're looking to get the capsules to dry storage during this time period. The 300-296 waste site just north of town, remediated, which means removed, and that waste will go to the environmental restoration disposal facility. And then one big thing too, we did get a question before about transuranic waste. Let me briefly cover that. We have been in constant contact with the waste isolation pilot plant folks. Even though we're not actively shipping, we participate in the National Transuranic Waste Site. True, not commission, but committee that they have to oversee it. Right now, we have about 3,000 containers that were previously certified. We plan to get those recertified by bringing the program up from the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant team. It's called CCP, which is Central Characterization Project. And we hope to start that in 26 timeframe, get the what we call acceptable knowledge pack in place. And then by the end of 27, we hope to actually be ready to ship the waste, continue shipping the waste to the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. And that would actually physically start in 2028. So you can see the progression as we move forward. And then again, what we're doing is working off the higher risk items that we see based on technical and radiological profiles to the other. So that's all I have. Over to you, Corey.
Thanks, Tom. So as I said earlier, my name's Corey Lowe. I'm the Deputy Assistant Manager for Mission Support. I'm standing in today for my boss, who's Brian Harkins. He's the Assistant Manager for Mission Support. He was out of pocket this week. And so I had the opportunity to come down here, and I appreciate it to talk with you. If you can bear with me, I'm going to cover these last slides. And as Delmar said earlier, infrastructure work is not always the most glamorous work, but it is absolutely vital to the continued mission of the site. And it's important work, and I'm excited to walk you through the list. I'll get us across the finish line. I know folks are getting hungry, so I'll try to walk through this. Many of these speak for themselves, so they don't require a whole lot of context. So everybody hear me okay? All right, so if you'll walk through the list here, we'll start with in 100D area, we're going to initiate reconfiguration and upgrades for our water system in the 100D area, and specifically the river pump house in the D area. You're going to see throughout the list a lot of water projects. And those are key projects to the mission at the site because our water system provides water for all aspects of the mission. And by that, I mean it provides water or fire suppression, it provides raw water to support project work, and it provides potable water for drinking. And so key aspects. And the unfortunate side of it is many of our water systems were built back in the 40s. And so many of those components have outlived their design life. And we've got a long mission ahead of us. And so we need to modernize those systems, perhaps even improve some capability of those and increase the reliability of those systems. And so you'll see a lot of those water projects throughout the list here. Following right behind that is another key one, our water treatment plant for the Central Plateau. This replaces an aging facility, provides key water capability to the projects on the site as well. And follow that with a third water project right there. In addition to being able to push water around the site, you got to have reservoirs to store water. And so we're replacing a 200 potable water tank in our 200 West area. In addition to the water projects, we're going to have some electrical projects as well, another key component to the mission out there. So we will complete the 100 area mission critical distribution feeders. This upgrades our distribution lines in the 100 area, and that meets not only current needs, but future needs for transmission of electrical. This project also complements our 230 kV project, our 230 kV transmission line project that you'll hear me talk about next. We're executing that project along with Bonneville Power Association, and we're excited for what that's going to bring to capability for the site there. Specifically with regards to the 230 kV project, that replaces a loop that is key to the delivery of electricity to the site. That system, like the others that we've talked about, is rapidly aging. It's exceeded its design life. And this will not only replace that system, it will increase the reliability of that system, and it will reduce our chances of unplanned outages, because that's one that directly supports our water treatment, or excuse me, our WTP facility down the road. So another key project there. Not always one that's going to grab a lot of headlines, but an absolutely important one behind the scenes. And then finally on the slide there, we're going to complete a cross tie of the sanitary water systems for the 200 and west areas. Another project that provides a redundant sanitary water cross tie between the west and east areas. Another one that reduces risk associated with a failure of existing lines there. So if you'll follow me to the last slide here, and I'll take us across the finish line. We're going to replace another potable water tank in the 200 east area. As I said before, key components of that water system that have outlived their life, and we need them for many years ahead. You heard me mention the D area river pump house on the previous slide we initiated, and in this planning window that we're talking about here, we'll actually complete that in 26 as well. So we'll bring that one across the finish line. We're going to initiate the replacement of our single circuit electrical distribution poles. Another one that kind of speaks for itself. Many of those poles have been out there for decades. Many of them are wood poles. The elements are hard on them, and we're going to need them to function for a long time. And so this project's key in that it will swap out a lot of those. It'll meet our future needs, current as well as future needs for electrical on the site. The next one stands out a little bit on its own. We actually have preservation upgrades at B Reactor. As many of you are aware, B Reactor is a National Historic Landmark. It's part of the Manhattan Project National Historic Park. These upgrades provide for roof replacement, exterior block ceiling, and electrical systems, and they're critically necessary to improve safety for the continued public access to that facility that's a wonderful treasure for our country. And then the last two, we're going to complete a lighting area project along Route 4 South in the 300 area. The commuters that transit our arterials coming to the site are important to us. That lighting is a critical project there to improve safety in that area. And then the last one, in parallel to the D area project that we talked about with the river pump house, we've got another pump house in the B area, and we have a parallel project doing the same thing to upgrade that facility and really bring to bear a new capability in water delivery that aligns with the future mission of the site. So I hope I met what I promised. I'd get us across the finish line. I tried to make it somewhat brief, recognizing that there's some tired eyes and probably hungry stomachs, but that's all I had to present for you today, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. This was very informative, and I just am so grateful to be working at Hanford. It's such an exciting time with so much happening and coming to fruition. We have regulator perspective next. In light of the time, I don't see anyone from the regulators in the room, but I do see some folks online. So if we have anyone from EPA to provide perspective, would you care to open your camera and your microphone? Is there anyone on from the Washington State Department of Ecology on Teams who would like to offer some perspective, opening their camera and their microphone? Hello.
Good afternoon. This is Dan McDonald.
Hello, Dan.
Thank you all for your presentation. I appreciate it. A couple of comments and a question or two, primarily for Del Mar. If I heard you correctly, you talked about the idea of going to 100% design before we move forward with construction. As you're more aware than I, Del Mar, we have reviews at 60% and 90%. Are we going to look forward to 100% review? And as I'm sure you recognize, my concern has to do with permitting and ecology supporting the genesis of everything needed to move forward with that. That's the first question. Second question has to do with the impact analysis that you folks do when you do run into things like the heater startup process. Could you comment on the kinds of things you look at, particularly how you reassess what you end up with in terms of float? Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. So impact analysis and elements, I mean, you know, as compared to the tool, you know, this will be a kind of an annual updated tool. So, you know, for those shorter term impact analysis, you know, obviously it wouldn't show in an update of this tool, but, you know, we're constantly evaluating, you know, the changing conditions and, you know, for example, the heater issue or failure with the startup commissioning. I mean, that's kind of why you're doing a startup commissioning. So that's not so much as an unexpected event but as to a fact of that's what we're doing is going through the startup commissioning to try to identify those. But to answer the question, yeah, we're constantly evaluating those actions and the impacts to schedule. You know, in that particular case, I don't think there was no, like Brian said, damage caused. We hadn't got glass in the melter yet. And it's just a matter of working with the vendors to identify the cause of the failure and repair it. So that's probably a fairly near-term activity relative to the larger scope that we're talking here. You know, on the permitting process, you know, in general, the intention is to, you know, get the design completed. Now, you know as well as I do, 100% is kind of a misnomer because you're never 100% until you're done. But I would offer that I'll get with Tom and Matt, who are the leads for that project, and probably have a more detailed discussion of exactly how the design schedule and the permitting activities will coordinate. We'll probably give you a better answer and understand it from the perspective of there's a lot of associated permitting actions with the design activities that the state will be essential in helping us update any designs, modify and get those permitted, you know, to support the next major phase, which is the, you know, initiation of the high level waste capability, which really gives us the full suite to begin treatment of all aspects of the tank waste versus just the simpler supernate, which is the DFLAW is focused on at this time. Hope that addressed your question, Dan.
It does. Thank you, Delmar.
Colleen tells me we have a comment from Dave Enan in the chat.
Just that, excuse me, Dave Enan says, thank you for the presentation and the opportunity also to comment, but there's nothing to add at this time. So thank you.
Do we have anyone in the chat while we have you with us?
We-
This is Colleen Drinkard with HMIS.
We do. Roberto Armijo from EPA. Can you unmute and give us your question or type it in the chat?
Oh, sorry, I don't have a question. I was just identifying myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there anyone in the room who has a question? Please raise your hand and we'll be happy to call on you. I see Pam Larson.
I'm sorry. We're working through planning right now to actually produce an estimate that costs that and actually applies planning to put that into the project that I briefed to you today. Actually begins, in 26 specifically on the slide there. And we're still working with our congressional appropriators to make sure that we're appropriately resourced to get done what needs to be done to that facility.
That roof's been needing attention for a long time.
Yes.
I hope you get lucky and no damage occurs between now and then.
Yes, ma'am.
And also was no mention of the test bed initiative, which some of us have close to our hearts. Is there a time frame when you will more closely examine that opportunity? Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, there is. And again, there's kind of the ones that just didn't fly to the heavy because that's really an enabler for the path forward. But we are continuing to pursue the test bed. We're finishing up the NEPA evaluations and the WEIR activities here fairly soon, weeks to months. And then we'll be entering the resubmittal process of the permitting with the state. So that is ongoing. It is something that we hope to get to late 23, early 24 right now. But it is more of an enabler activities is just a reason it didn't show up at the placemat level on this particular one.
Thank you, Delmar. And Mia, I saw your hand up along with Pam as well.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first is the 5-year plan compatible with the adaptive milestone approach milestones that were put out for public comment earlier?
The adaptive milestone approach, we are looking at the 5-year plan, but as well as the 10-year plan to try to work with ecology, or not try, will work with ecology and EPA to establish near-term milestones to support the risk reduction activities that we mentioned earlier. So yeah, they are connected, if that's the basis of your question.
And will DOE be using this 5-year plan to negotiate the next set of adaptive milestones?
The 5-year plan is for planning purposes only. When we get close to actually negotiating milestone revisions with the state and EPA, it'll be more technically based on actual what we can and cannot do with consideration to a number of things, technical abilities, budget profiles, things of that nature. So I can't give you a definite answer in that. But again, that's our goal, is to move forward to make milestones, establish milestones that are achievable within the constraints that we know at the time. And then the shorter period of window, which means adaptive milestones, gives us the ability to be, one, reduce the risk, but at the same time to the site, but also at the same time, not have to go into constant renegotiation, trying to set up long-term TPA milestones. Because again, you get out besides the 3-year window that Delmar indicated, current year, planning year, which for us right now will be 24, and then in this late winter or late December, early January, we'll actually be starting looking at 25. So again, they're all connected. And that's the purpose of what we're trying to do.
Chris Sutton.
Yeah, speaking of milestones, it would be nice to know which of all these activities, either initiating or completing, are actually meeting milestones. I think I saw one milestone listed on here somewhere, or on the placemat that I downloaded from the website. But it'd be nice if that could be put on here, because milestones are so important and because they are a driver of funding.
Yeah, that's actually, appreciate the comment. I honestly hadn't thought about that, but I think that's a good comment to consider, because we hadn't done that. One of the things that I'll just offer, and again, I think that's a great comment, is part of the thought processes here is the milestone should be reflecting the important work, and it's the important work that when we accomplish that I think Brian speaks to the virtuous circle that really shows that success, and that we're moving forward, and that we're investment worthy for future work. But I think communicating that those things are also tied to our joint milestones would be a value added. So I think it's a valuable comment. Thank you.
And Colleen, we have a question in the chat.
Yes, we have a question here from Kate Allen. The question is, does this work address the issue of leaking tanks, bleeding contaminated water into the groundwater?
I mean, the placemat as a tool, I don't think does that. I mean, it's really a bigger picture reflection of, the moving forward. And frankly, I would offer that, that's one of the things we've talked about in terms of time isn't our friend, and that, moving forward and getting the treatment systems and capabilities up in place so we can move the mission forward as a whole to retrieve all the single shell tanks, including, the ones that have potential current additional impacts with leaking, is important. I mean, as we talked to in the HAB format earlier, yesterday, we shared some perspectives on the agreed order between the state and the department that are outlining actions. So I'd refer to that discussion and or that document if you're interested in those specific impacts.
And along those lines, we have that meeting recorded and we'll get that posted to the Hanford.gov events calendar so you can listen to that as soon as we can. And then you had another question in the chat?
There is another question in the chat. I will go ahead and read it. The question is, how will the DOE work to implement public comments for the 5-year plan?
Good question. I mean, obviously, we've had multiple discussions on this activity. And I think I mentioned that this isn't kind of a one and done, idea. This is kind of part of a ongoing sequence of events. And I mean, really, the purpose of this meeting, the discussion, is to get those thoughts and impacts so we can consider those and modify the tool to be as useful as possible to what we're trying to communicate and to accomplish. So that's the best answer. I mean, obviously, we'll get multiple comments from a lot of different perspectives, and nothing is perfect, and we won't be able to, address or to make a change, and they may not even be consistent. But we are truly, I mean, it's really truly intended to be an outwardly communicating tool that's useful for you, and it's a vehicle or a tool that allows us as a department that's responsible to communicate to, the public, our regulators, the stakeholders on, kind of the bigger picture of what we're trying to do, moving the project forward. Obviously, as some of these questions point out, there's lots of significantly important issues that aren't, in this communication tool. And, we're all constantly looking for input and thoughts of, additional things we can consider to help communicate those. I think as I opened with, I would just offer the context that in this tool, what we're trying to do is to communicate a 5-year window of those high-level objectives that kind of go beyond that 3-year budgeting period and is long enough to be meaningful. But I think Tom here mentioned as well, once you get beyond 3 to 5 years, the variables become so hard that it's impossible, for us trying to execute the work to accurately predict 4 years of work and then where will be the 5th year. So it's keeping in that meaningful window, but also not being so variable as to be not meaningful to you. So interested in 2 aspects of that, I would say, is one, in the aspect of this tool, how it can be better, but I think also comments could easily address, maybe there's something else or different elements, that different tools that, we haven't recognized yet. So we'd be interested in that feedback as well.
And then Jen, did you have anything further to add to that? All right, thank you. All right, let's go to folks that are on the phone only. Anyone who is on the phone only, please hit #6 to unmute, *6 to unmute, and ask your question, please. Not hearing any, let's return back to the room. Any other questions in the room? Ms. Burke?
Okay, so during the public meeting on August 16th for WESIF, it was confirmed by Derek Klein that the milestone, the August 31st, 2025 milestone needed to be renegotiated with ecology, that it was going to be missed. And as well as the contamination that was found, separate issue, but at the 324 building, the contamination that was found east of B cell, we've also heard that is going to definitely change the schedule of the 324 building. I'm just wondering if those renegotiated milestones, changes, shifts in the schedule are reflected in the placemat.
With regards to those milestones, yes, because of COVID and the continued problems we had trying to place the micropiles, the dates that you see in the 5-year plan are more realistic, more risk informed, is what we like to say. And working with EPA and ecology for not this set of milestones, but others, is that we want to do thorough research to have a better understanding of what we're facing, draw up the engineering plans, and things of that nature, what resources are necessary, and then come back once we have a realistic, understanding of what it's going to take resource-wise, but also time-wise, and then we can set milestones that are achievable. And that more or less folds into with regards to the adaptive milestone approach that you mentioned too. That's another facet of that. So yes, those milestones will be listed. We've been letting the regulators know for some time now. And that as long as we're making safe, steady progress and we're keeping them informed, at least on a monthly basis, if not more frequently at our monthly meetings, to keep them abreast of what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask another question? Is that okay?
We're not seeing anyone else on the call or in the chat unless there are other folks in the room. So please go ahead.
Okay, so the life cycle schedule, scope, and cost report shows dramatically increased funding for the next many years. But this 5-year placemat just shows the set funding of 2.7 billion. I'm wondering what the plan is to bridge that disconnect with funding.
So very good question, and probably should have brought that up before, because that's one of the things we talked about developing. With this placemat and that assumption, the department's not trying to say that that is the funding profile, and we're not looking at other changes both above that. It's just that's our best assumption at the point. So this is a picture with that profile. If the numbers go up, then obviously more work could be done within those windows of time or things brought up sooner. So as we put this together, part of the struggle is what do we base it on? So we chose to base it on kind of the recent funding profile and flatline it for this window of time and show what we would accomplish, what those accomplishments would be the scenario. Not to say that that's the limitations of what we're going to request or even what we necessarily expect to happen, but as assumption. So the way to view this from a perspective is, this combined with, our integrated priority list would go to the question, if we get more funding in this year, where would that go? And this would give some perspective of not only that single year perspective, but, if we're investing in A, trying to get something done 5 years from now, you might want to continue that investment versus moving it if you got more funding and stuff. So it isn't intended to say that's what we're predicting or requiring or limiting ourselves to in our process. It's simply an assumption, and if that assumption holds, this is what we see the next 5 years. If that helps. It's a dynamic situation. Frankly, the way it works is October rolls around, Congress gives us a number, and we have to adjust. I mean, we assume A, and if we get more, we adjust, and we get less, we go down. Having, and there's only so much adjusting you can do in that short term, so the consistency of funding is sometimes as critical as any individual year.
All right, we have reached the 1 o'clock hour. Let's make one more call for the folks on the phone. *6 to unmute if you'd like to ask a question on the phone. Hearing none, let's check with Colleen in the chat. Any final questions in the chat?
Nothing new in the chat. Thank you.
All right. And last go around the room. Would anyone here like to ask another question before we conclude? All right, wonderful. On behalf of DOE, we would like to thank everyone for attending. We sincerely appreciate you coming and your participation, and we hope this was helpful to you. Have a wonderful afternoon and a safe drive home.